So how do you fall asleep? Counting sheep? We're talking sweet retreats right after this. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden Home, a show about design and blurring the lines between inside and out. Just look what was delivered just this morning. Isn't she adorable? Well, I'm very excited about what's going on with the house. Today, they're actually putting the columns on the house, which will anchor that roof to the floor in a beautiful way. But we'll get around to that a little later in the show. We'll also talk about roses and lavender, two fragrances that are thought to help people get a good night's sleep. But do they? We'll hear from a sleep expert about what we need to do to drift off into la-la land more easily. We'll also take a look at a charming Savannah garden and see how they've adapted to the warm southern climate. This show is all about sweet retreats. So why don't we get started on the sleeping porch of the house? Come on, there you go, baby. I must say, when I show people around the garden home retreat, it's this space that they're the most fascinated by. This is the upstairs porch, or the sleeping porch, a very old idea. You see, throughout the country, sleeping out on the porch was a way to stay cool during the night. You particularly see this in the South for obvious reasons, because it gets so hot during the summer. And that's the case here. And so what I wanted to do was to create a place where you could sleep outside without actually being outside, camping. So you can camp out on this porch. A great way to blur the lines between inside and out, don't you think? Now you may be asking yourself, what about insects and things like that? Well, you see, this porch is going to be screened with copper wire just like this. And what I like about the copper wire, as it begins to patina, you can't really even tell it's there. It's not like looking through aluminum screen, which tends to give a gauzy sort of haze. So this is what we're going to use on all three sides of this porch. Now, the scale of this porch is about 40 by 14 feet, so it's really kind of a long gallery. At the back, we have the brick wall with the lime wash on it. And the floor, well, it's a traditional plank floor which will be painted. The ceiling, it will be beadboard, and the color will be pale blue. The reason for this is that pale blue actually confuses insects. So insects like wasps and dirt daubers won't build their nests on it. As you can see, I've gotten a little ahead of myself by bringing furniture out here, but what else is new? I'm excited about this space, and I just wanted to see how these pieces looked against the wall and how they fit in this volume of space that we've created. Now, I love this wicker. It's just perfect for this style house. And what's great about it is it's very long lasting. You see, this has been dipped in paint with a primer and then dipped with the final coat. Beautiful color, don't you think? And of course, it bears pointing out the fabric. You see, this fabric can really take the weather. It's an indoor-outdoor fabric. So what I'm really proud of here is that all of these furnishings will last for a long time. Now, with this being the sleeping porch, the ambience that we've created here hopefully will be a sleep aid in itself. You've got great views of the landscape beyond, the sound of water with the pool just down there in the garden. And if that's not enough, you can look over to the east pasture and there are sheep. You know the old adage, if you can't sleep, then count sheep. Well, actually, there are experts who now can help us with all sorts of sleep problems, and there are some very scientific remedies. Dr. T. Glenn Pate sheds a little light on this subject.
It's very important that we sleep. 1/3 of our living should be in sleep. Sleep is good for you. It's vital for your health and for your well-being. Before you go to bed, you need to power down. Now, there are emails out there, there are video games, the web, television, all kind of electronic devices, and they keep us connected, and that's good. We're connected to the world. But technology causes cognitive stimulation. That means that the brain is stimulated. If the brain is stimulated, you're not going to go to sleep very well. If you don't get enough sleep, you're going to increase your chances of having obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular problems, heart problems, and even the ability to fight off infections. A good night's sleep is when you wake up in the morning and you're ready to go. You feel refreshed, you're looking forward to the day, and you're ready to accomplish something at work. Make your room, your bedroom, an enticing place, someplace you want to go.
Have you ever tried to grow a particular type of plant but just couldn't seem to get it right? Well, that's the case with me and lavender. You see, I struggled with trying to grow this beautiful herb for years. Even though I knew that it required well-drained soil, I would always plant it directly into the soil in my garden. You see, this is the problem, because my soil is basically heavy clay, which doesn't drain well at all. Of course, if you keep working at a problem long enough, over time you can usually come up with a solution. When I started growing lavender in large containers, where I could get the soil just right, the plants began to thrive, as you can see with this one. This variety is one called Provence, and I like it because of its incredible aromatic quality. You see, this comes from the essential oils in the plant. It's the same essential oils that are used in aromatherapy. This is the same oil that helps make this plant virtually pest resistant, even to deer. It's one of the few flowers that I know deer will not eat. So just because a plant maybe doesn't perform well, don't give up on it. Try growing it under different circumstances or conditions. I did this with lavender, and my persistence and patience paid off. Recently, I had an opportunity to visit with Gary Meehan, who spends his days in acres of this beautiful and fragrant herb. So what kind of year are you having with the lavender here at Bonnie Doon?
Here at Bonnie Doon Farm, we've enjoyed a beautiful spring, lots of extra moisture that the plants obviously wanted, continuous sun. The plants couldn't be nicer.
Gary, what are the best conditions for the soil to bring forth this sort of bloom?
Loose sandy soil is what I really recommend for anyone interested in planting lavender themselves. It's worked best for us. Alluvial wash, something that's well drained.
Since my soil is such heavy clay, I found that growing my lavender in containers works much better.
I can certainly agree with that.
Is there a variety of lavender that you would recommend to the beginning gardener?
Absolutely. I'd recommend Provençal over any other variety because of the beautiful color, the traditional look it has, eminently cookable, and most satisfying, and very representative of the typical lavender that people would wish to see.
I have to say it's pretty exciting around here today because we got the columns finally. You've probably been wondering if this was going to be the column for the front porch. No, these are strictly support. The beauty comes with these. These are fluted Greek Doric columns. And what I love about them is that they really fit the style of where we're going with this house. This is a new old house, and we're trying to build it around the period of about 1830 to 1840, which was right at the height of popularity of the Greek Revival. Now you can see Greek Revival architecture across the entire country. Okay, now let's talk about proportion for just a moment, because that's a very important component to this particular style. You see, these columns were sized for this size opening running across the length of the porch. We'll have 4 of these all the way across, and as the porch ties into the back, there's an antecolumn there, or a pilaster. Now, the columns themselves at the base are 20 inches, and they're slightly smaller than that at the top. But what's interesting about this particular style is this column for 1/3 of the way up is exactly parallel on each sides. Then it begins to taper after it reaches the 1/3 mark. That adds so much to the beauty and majesty of these columns, but it's a very subtle detail. Now let's talk about how they're constructed. Typically, these are made from a long-lasting wood like eastern red cedar or redwood. And what's interesting, and this is kind of a green component, they use little pieces of wood and they're finger jointed together and held together with a bonding agent or some sort of resin. And as you can see, they come to us already primed, crated up in a box and ready to go up. Now, all I have to do is get them in place and we'll get a coat of paint on them and we'll be that much closer to completion. Of all the spaces out here at the Garden Home Retreat, I have to say, at least for now, this is the sweetest retreat of all. I think it's because it's almost finished. And secondly, it's really my space. It's where I can come in, set up my easel, and do some painting. And for me, painting is very relaxing. I almost get into a meditative zone. And this space has a lot of light in it. And we're using some really great colors with some great fabrics and paint. And because there's so much light in here, I can bring in some of my favorite plants. So it's got a great feel to it. And hopefully when I'm not using it for crafts projects or painting, this will be a very hospitable and inviting place for friends. You know, when you travel as much as I do, it's so nice when you run into people who have open-armed hospitality. You know, I was in Savannah, Georgia not too long ago, where we saw beautiful gardens and met many talented people who invited us in for a look around.
When we bought this house in 1976, it was a shell that hadn't been lived in for many years. The brick wall was already around the garden, but it was caving in a little bit where the old outhouse had been. So when we bought the house and started to restore it, we had to tear the wall down and put it back up. But we loved the idea of a walled garden, and we have let the ivy and the actually creeping fig is most of what it's covering go over the bricks because it gives us a feeling of a forest in here. When we'd lived in the house for about 5 years, we realized that we could look out the kitchen window and see the garden, but that was all we could do. So we decided to add a porch and stairs that would go down into the garden so we could actually enjoy the garden itself. So not only is the porch an extra room, but now the yard is an extra room too. And I wanted brick beds bordering the garden just because I like the look of it. Carried out the theme of the patio, and we used the same Savannah gray bricks. The thing I love about it is the sense of peace that we get when we sit outside. We consider ourselves some of the most fortunate people in Savannah because we have a garden that's about twice as big as most people's. Right in the middle of downtown, you can come out here and you would never suspect that cars and trucks and everything else go whizzing by at all hours of the day and night. We don't hear a lot of it because of the walls, and this is just a wonderfully peaceful place to be. A home in the middle of a big urban area.
You know, this year it's been very surprising. We've gone through so much cold weather and some of my roses still haven't defoliated. This bed last year was gorgeous. I have 3 old-fashioned roses here, which include Ducher, Lindy, and Catherine Zemay. Now, what's wonderful about them is that the flower forms are all slightly different. Put them together and you have a gorgeous bouquet. And think about this by your bedside table. With that fragrance, who wouldn't have sweet dreams? You know, rose breeders are coming up with solutions to problems for roses. They're breeding for better disease resistance, they're breeding fragrance back into roses, and they're coming up with some exquisite blooms.
Sam McGreedy was the great breeder out of Northern Ireland. He's now retired in New Zealand, and Sam used to repeat, "Give me a plant, I can always put a flower on it." And it's easy enough to put a tea bloom on an excellent plant, 1 or 2 generations, and you can do it.
There are those who believe growing roses has become too difficult, but one plant breeder has decided to do something about it. Jerry Toomey has applied a lifetime of plant breeding to create a new, healthier tea rose called the Dream Rose. It's more disease resistant and designed to help garden enthusiasts spend less time caring for their roses and more time just enjoying them.
Essentially, I've been breeding to improve the plant on roses. What's happened to the flower is that the show people have dominated the publicity. They wanted a single, one bloom on a single stem, the high tea. They could nurse it and baby it. So the plant breeders, to meet that demand, or that artificial demand, bred for blooms only. Now in plant breeding you get what you select for. They'd spray in the greenhouse, spray in the field, until roses have got to be difficult to grow, put it mildly. The average person said I had bad luck last year with my roses. It wasn't bad luck, it was just bad plants.
Jerry, what is different about your breeding program than those, let's say, from Canada and the Midwest, where they're breeding for cold hardiness?
I've used basically different species. I've emphasized the rugosa, the hardy one from Russia that'll take 40 below and virtually immune to disease. I've used the Wichuriana creeper. It grew on the shores of northern Japan. It roots as it goes along. One plant can cover 50 feet. I wanted to get own rooting ability back in these roses, as well as health.
So after 20 years of breeding and observing the roses, you've brought them up here to an area that is conducive to disease, laid them out here and said, okay, you know, the ones that survive, survive, and the ones that fall off, and the ones that did survive, you took those as your parent stock, and now you've started this whole crossing or breeding operation.
Well, I was breeding from day one, introducing species blood, but then you get a large population, maybe 25, 30,000 seedlings a year. You'll select down to 1,000 maybe, then plant them up here with no spray and let nature take its course. The interesting thing of this climate in Watsonville, it's about the same as North Europe, black soil, never too hot, never too cold, but the diseases are there 12 months of the year mutating and working for you. The simplest thing in plant breeding is let nature do the selecting for you if you give her a chance.
Tell me about some of the highlights of your career.
Well, I think the rose that's given me the most satisfaction is Audrey Hepburn. The Hague in Holland is...
This is Audrey Hepburn?
This is Audrey Hepburn.
Oh, it's beautiful.
These are young plants, and it just produces a mass of bloom. It's almost like a bouquet all summer. These plants will get up about 4 to 5 feet. Now,
this is an award winner.
Yes, the Hague in Holland is the outstanding international test. There's only been 3 American roses that have won there. Queen Elizabeth, which is universal still, a yellow that has sort of dropped out of commerce, and then Audrey Hepburn got a gold medal. The second year got another gold medal for perfume.
Why did you name it Audrey Hepburn?
Well, a wonderful actress and a wonderful name for a rose. And I was in the Huntington Gardens when got word that the crew that had done her 12 Gardens of the World film wanted an outstanding rose to name after her. She was Dutch extraction, and this had won in The Hague, so the story all came together. It's been a happy situation. Some roses sort of get a little poorer as they get older. Others just get a little better every year, and this is one that seems to improve with age.
Jerry, you know, one of my favorite roses is iceberg. It's, you know, popular all over, and but I do have to spray for it.
I'm surprised that you have to bother spraying iceberg. It's the #1 rose in the world.
Yeah, but it'll get black spot for me.
A bit. Out here we can find the odd leaf as they age at the bottom, a bit of black spot, but it's a survivor that it'll keep blooming and blooming.
Now this is one of yours, a white one.
This is one I have a lot of hope for. This is a seedling of iceberg by the Dream Orange, which is one of the healthiest roses ever.
So you took white iceberg and crossed it with your Dream Orange and came up with this.
This is a tea bloom, a beautiful center. It drops clean.
Well, maybe I'll have to try one of these.
We'll
and
get
see
you
how
some seedlings. We're going to propagate this one immediately. And my dream has partially come true anyway. We're testing the best of my seedlings now worldwide, and the reports are encouraging. We're not perfect, but we're getting better.
One of the advantages of having livestock out here at the Garden Home Retreat is that I can take advantage of the manure. Sheep, chicken, we've got it all, including horse. Now, the thing that I've learned over the years is to not put the manure on directly, meaning not pure manure. What I like to do is take it and layer it in and make compost, and that's what I've done here. Basically what we do is we take dried material, leaves, all of the things that we cut out of the garden here, and we layer it. Layer green on top of brown, and then rotate that over the course of about 6 months. So by applying some manure to that process, it actually speeds up the decomposition and makes what I consider black gold. You just can't believe what it does for these fruit trees. Now these are my gala apples, and these are grown in a espaliered form. This shape is called a cordon, and we've just cut them back, and in just a month or so they're going to burst forth with lots of blooms. These buds will begin to swell, white flowers will cover these limbs, and soon to follow will be tiny little green apples, and then by summer it'll be loaded with red fruit. Now these apples are delicious eaten right off the tree or in pies. Now that's a pretty sweet deal. You know, one of the advantages of living out here in the country is that I've got lots of space. That's what the Garden Home Retreat affords me. However, you don't run into your neighbors very often, whereas in town, I have an opportunity to talk to my neighbors over the picket fence. We trade ideas and our enthusiasm for historic architecture. As a matter of fact, my neighbors Ann and John Gerard hosted a group of international master gardeners through their property in 2007, and they were kind enough to invite us into their garden home to see how it transformed from drab winter to brilliant summer.
The concept of the building, you can, if you see it in plan, is that it's a garden, and the garden is part of the house is part of the garden, and so they were conceived together. And I think that's what makes it so successful. And one of the things that we were struck with when we first saw the house was this potential for this great garden.
When we've added plants, although we do use new cultivars, we really have tried to focus on plantings that were of the period, and at the same time plantings that have that English type theme.
I think the English revival style is, of course, the house. It's in the manor style. The garden is just an extension of the entry hall. If you open the door and walk in the front door, the back door is open, you get this beautiful view down the center of the garden. That attracted us.
Well, but we've added a lot of flowers like the hollyhocks, the foxgloves, the yarrow. We now have the Confederate rose, and these are all very, very old plants, the echinacea, the strawberry begonias. But you know, we have the irises and the glads and the roses that are all plants that have been used in our area for many, many years. I have some tuberoses, for instance. We have camellias, we have gardenias, that actually those three plants were all here originally. We have English ivy that I say it blooms because it has a berry-like bloom on it, and it has to be very old for that to happen. And we're one of the few people in Arkansas that fertilize our ivy because it just grows every place and we love it, as you've seen in some of our ivy trees. We really do garden together. I often tease he's a much better gardener than I am because he's been doing it longer, but we really do share the garden.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. We've certainly seen lots of ways to blur the lines between inside and out, and also picked up a few tips on how to get a good night's sleep. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Allen Smith's Garden Home.
We're exploring the winter garden, and there's a lot more you can do than you might think. Get ideas for beating winter's chill with terrariums, and get a jump on your spring planting. I'm sowing lettuce seed. Learn why I'm pairing these large plants with these small plants to create a hedgerow. Looking forward to sharing this and much more with you right here on The Garden Home.